to me, come to me.
Good morning, and welcome again to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Congregation on this Sunday morning, May 30th, 2021. I'm Lillian Fifield, your service leader for today, and our service today is special to all of us. It's a memorial service featuring a sermon entitled Good Grief, with our own Connie Erickson, and some other very special events happening. Connie, too, will be available following the service for an open after-sermon discussion on Zoom. And remember that discussion check-in time is 11:15, and the actual discussion starts at 11:30. To join us in the discussion, just click on the link that Michael sent on Saturday when he sent out the same Zoom link for the service. A reminder, all of our services are recorded and you can view them anytime on YouTube. Sermon copies, if they're available, are mailed to you usually on Friday, along with the order of service, or on Saturday when you get your Zoom links. We ask too, as we do each week, that you spend some time reaching out and making contact with other UU members. You know, the months go on and the time goes on, and too much time passes without having had that contact with someone you haven't spoken to for a while. So just do it. Just pick up that list of members and point to somebody and say, gee, I haven't talked to this person in quite a while, and today's the day I'm going to reach out and make that call. Lastly, I want to thank Michael Wheeler again, of course, for all of the work that he puts in every week for our services. And Lucy Swingham, who is currently doing double work, not only working on the producing of the videos and Facebook content, but also our weekly UmQuest newsletter. So thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Michael. And now, as usual, we will begin our service with the lighting of our chalice. Our chalice lighting words for today are, in loving memory of the ones we love, and may that love's brightness always shine down from above. For some opening words today, we've chosen Tess Schaefer, Heaven Has No Regrets, to remind us that heaven or death can leave a hole in your heart. But it's up to you, it's up to me to choose if that hole will be filled with pain or anger or eternal darkness of loss. Or if you choose to fill it with light, to fill it with love, and to have that hole shine out of you like a spotlight into your life, keeping the memories alive. It's up to you. All up to you. Today's service is about remembering. Remembering those who are important to us, remembering those who have been a part of our UU family and a part of your family. Our current board member until July 1st is going to be our sermon leader today. She really needs little introduction. We all know her. She's been around for a long, long time. But I couldn't possibly bring her up without telling you that she is the most compassionate, heart-centered woman that I've ever known. And every week when she writes one of those columns in our Quest, and if you don't read them, you're really missing something, I am reminded again and again of her beautiful soul. I found out today that Connie joined us, not really knowing what she was joining, back in 1998 when she was brought to a party by Shannon Applegate. Turned out to be a dancing kind of event, and she met some other people, and she liked what she did, and she liked who she met, and decided that she was going to stay. And that gift became our gift for staying. So please, please welcome Connie Erickson today. She's going to join me in reading number 720 in your hymnal, and that is Remember Them.
This is a time in our service where we normally have our meditation, but today we're going to honor those beloved congregants who have passed away. So if you feel comfortable, please take a moment to quiet your mind, close your eyes if you like, and let yourself feel the emotions that come into your body. Lillian and I will be reading the reading from our hymnal, number 720. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them.
In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them.
In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them.
In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them.
In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them.
In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them.
When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them.
When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them.
So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now part of us as we remember them.
And now we would like to honor the friends and members of the UU congregation who have passed away.
Dale and Lucille Allred, Dick Bailey, Eleanor Wilson Berg, Gardner Chappelle Poole, Kasha Clare, B. Duffy, Don Irvin, Lori Farmer, Gordon French, Jan Fritz, Gail Gaston, Ted Gordon.
Mary Grant, Vern Haas, Lorna Hayden, Michael Heyman, Miriam Johnson, Cliff Kennerly, Jane and Harry LeBeau, Corinne and Holden McTaggart. Helen Marie Miller. Lori Moen. Jody Nolte. Norm Oswald Vance Parkhurst.
Carol Carroll, Clifford Pearson, Kim Pearson, Jim Pratt, Anna Slimmer, Helen Stelzen, Chuck Telford, Jim Terry, Jean Thomas, Lori Vanis, Isabel Wheeler, Dale Williams, and Janet Woodward. I'd like to share a quote with you. And this quote is by Sir John Chrysostom. They whom we lose and love are no longer where they were before. They are now wherever we are. Good morning. The reason that I'm standing here today is because last March marked a year of our lives being changed by the pandemic. I've really felt my sorrow, and I wanted to talk to you about grief, my grief and your grief. A feeling of loss has touched all of us. Listening to these names of UU congregants who have passed away reminds me that we share a common sorrow. Many of the ideas that I want to share with you today come from a book that was recommended to me by my best friend after both of our mothers passed away in 2019. This book is called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Frances Weller. Most of us associate grief with the loss of someone we love. Yet many of us can say that we've been grieving for over a year and maybe we haven't lost someone we love. This book has helped me understand the many ways that loss has touched our hearts. In this book, Frances Weller describes what he calls the 5 gates of grief. And of course, we are all familiar with the first gate, which is the grief of losing someone we love. Most cultures have rituals or ceremonies that help people deal with the passing of their loved one. But what about the loss we feel when someone we love is going through a prolonged illness? Or when we realize we have lost some of our own abilities? Think of how many times we've heard ourselves say, I used to be able to do that. We grieve when we lose our control. We long for how we used to feel and what we used to be able to do. Well, we all have attachments of who we think we should be. The second gate of grief is that grief that occurs in places untouched by love. These are the places in us where we feel shame or that there's something defective about us. I think we all might remember an experience where we have blamed ourselves for something that has happened to us. Some of us may have carried this blame for over 50 years, like me. Regret is also part of this second gate. We have all made some bad choices or decisions in our lives. Holding on to these regrets may be a source of our feeling loss. And this type of grief often leads to depression. The third gate is the grief we carry for all the sorrows of the world. And there are many. The cumulative grief of the world is overwhelming. If you spend much time watching television or listening to the radio or streaming news on your phone, you're constantly hearing about the suffering of the world. Suffering is the first noble truth of the Buddha. All the great religions speak of suffering. This recognition of our grief reminds me, hopefully reminds you, of our seventh principle: respect for the independent web of all existence of which we are a part. Our grief reveals to us that we are a part of this earth. It's our separation from nature that causes us sorrow. The fourth gate of grief is grief for what we expected and we did not receive. At the core of this grief is our longing to belong. Weller writes, "We are born expecting our deep time ancestors experienced, we are born expecting what our deep time ancestors experienced as their birthright, namely the container of the village." T.S. Eliot wrote in Wasteland, "Once upon a time, we knew the world from our birth." There was a time when most people lived in villages or small communities, and they knew each other. Our feelings of lacking something comes from a society that has failed to offer us what we need as humans. We humans were designed to expect comfort, respect, and equal treatment of each other. Another facet of this grief is the loss of our expectations of the purpose of our life. Often we are never acknowledged or valued for our gifts that we've offered to our community. And more likely we're asked the question, "What do you do for a living?" This sense of loss of purpose makes us feel empty. The fifth gate is our ancestral grief. This is the grief that we carry in our bodies from the sorrows experienced by our ancestors. This is a grief that many want to ignore or deny. For me, I think that experiencing the Black Lives Matter movement has opened our eyes to this grief. We know that Native American lives matter, Asian American lives matter, immigrants' lives matter, refugees' lives matter, all lives matter. What has happened to our ancestors matters to us. I think that we often deny our grief, maybe because we're embarrassed, or we feel that our grief is not as severe as the grief of another person. Carl Jung wrote, "Embrace your grief, for there your soul will grow." The grief we feel is ours, and it is worthy of our attention. It is normal and a natural response to loss. I agree with William Cowper, who said, "Grief is itself a good medicine." But facing grief is hard work, and the grief that we've been facing is non-ending. It takes courage to face all those losses that we're experiencing. Can you imagine the grief that's carried by all those overworked caregivers in this country? I think bringing grief out of the shadow is our spiritual responsibility. We as a community need to help one another through this time of ongoing grief. Our UU congregation has an opportunity, and this opportunity, I think, is to create an experience or experiences for sharing our grief and thereby reminding ourselves that we are connected to one another. Well, how will we do that? Well, nearly all indigenous cultures have rituals that bring people together for grieving. We too could create a ritual. There's a stone ritual where people can share their grief and that grief that they're holding in their hearts. We could also participate in a loving kindness meditation. But personally, I'd like to start a My Story writing group where we would share our stories with each other. We need to be creative in how we care for ourselves and how we care for each other. In closing, I would like to thank Charlie Brown, who taught us all the saying, "Good grief." And then Winnie the Pooh, who reminds us how lucky we are to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard. And finally, to Gary Rowe, who wrote, "We grieve because we love." I hope to be seeing all of you soon. Thank you.
Let's break this down to just a thought that says
Our closing words for today come from Maya Angelou and Shakespeare. Maya says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, and people will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel." And Shakespeare said, "I cannot but remember such things said that were most precious to me." And as we extinguish the chalice today, think of some words that Gandhi gave us. There are no goodbyes for us. Wherever you are, you will always be in my heart.